Coming up, here comes the sun. Everything you need to know about this amazing star. Then the history of NATO explained. Also, Sister Act. A pair of badminton players may have opponents seeing double at the Paris Summer Olympics. Plus, some new stars are reviving a long tradition of panda diplomacy. We'll take you to San Diego for all the details. And spreading kindness.
And it's just a box filled with all sorts of toys. There's some educational items, fidget toys, just things like that might distract a kid in a tough or challenging situation.
How one teenager turned a simple idea into an inspiring community project.
We came up with the idea of the kindness kit. Through that, we founded Connor's Kindness Project, and that's kind of how we evolved to what we are now.
This is NBC Nightly News, Kids Edition.
All right, welcome back to Nightly News Kids Edition. It is great to be with you. Hoping you're having a terrific week. We have, as usual, a great lineup ahead, from our pop quiz to pandas. And a little later on, our Kids Edition correspondent sits down with our friend Laura Jarrett, who will be here to share her new project just for kids.
What inspired you to write this book?
I wanted to write a book that would make my two kids, James and June, proud of me. I wanted to write something that I could read with them at night. That's one of my favorite things to do, is when I can get home in time to read them stories at bedtime. And I wanted to write something that would get kids asking really hard questions.
But first, let's begin with the excessive heat that is impacting many parts of the country. Heat records have been shattered in places like Las Vegas. Let's face it, it's hot out there thanks to Mother Nature and the sun. And we've received some burning questions about this fascinating star. Let's get more from our good friend Dylan Dreyer.
Ah, the sun. Don't we all just love a warm, sunny day? The sun makes us feel happy, energized, relaxed. It's the sign of the start to a new day. It's also my favorite emoji. But I'm not the only one who loves the sun.
I think the sun's my favorite star because we know so much more about it than we do about any other star. It's just far more fascinating.
The sun is also a star and is the largest object in our solar system. It's the most important source of energy for life on Earth. It's the reason why we have day and night and why there are change of seasons. Without the sun, we wouldn't exist.
The most important thing is it gives us heat and light that makes life possible here on planet Earth.
We want to know, how old is the sun?
You're probably wondering if it's that important. How long has it been around?
The sun is 4.5 billion years old. That's 4,500 million years old. So it's quite old.
Well, that's a lot of zeros. That's 4.5 billion. NASA astrophysicist Dr. David Hathaway tells us we know the sun's age by looking at old things in our solar system.
We know it's that old from several different lines of evidence. Probably the best are from meteorites. That meteorites formed out of the cloud that the sun formed from. And we can look at radioactive elements in meteorites, and by seeing how they have changed, we can tell that the meteorites are in fact 4.5 billion years old.
Did you know? Without the sun, life on Earth would not exist. The sun provides light, heat, and energy, which stirs up the atmosphere to create wind and rain. With it, plants grow, and animals and humans eat. You don't want to ever get too close because the sun is about 10 million degrees. And while the sun may look really close to us, it's actually almost 95 million miles away.
If this were the sun, the Earth is the size of a pea. You can line up 100 Earths side by side all across the diameter of the sun, and you could put 1 million of them inside the sun. That large compared to the Earth.
Sometimes the sun can put on a really cool show. Have you heard of the Northern Lights? Also called Aurora Borealis. They are beautiful dancing waves of light that have captivated people all over the world.
The surface of the sun is hot, but the atmosphere above it is even hotter. It goes from 10,000 degrees to 1 million degrees. And it's so hot the sun can't hold on to it. So it blows off of the sun forming a wind that goes through the entire solar system called a solar wind.
Those collisions produce tiny flashes that fill the sky with colorful light as billions of flashes occur in sequence, appearing to move or dance in the sky. Stars like our sun burn for about 9 or 10 billion years. Don't worry, it's not going away anytime soon.
It's about halfway through its lifetime. And this, again, we know from the way it's burning hydrogen to make helium deep in its core, that it's going to run out of hydrogen in its core in about 4 billion years from now.
So in case you're wondering, the sun will come out tomorrow.
Okay, Dylan, thanks very much. Okay, time for our pop quiz now with summer in full swing. Our question this week is about a phrase you might be hearing a lot of lately. So, true or false? The dog days of summer are named after dogs' tendency to lounge about during the hotter months. I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. All right, time's up. The answer is false. The dog days of summer have nothing to do with dogs' behavior in the summer. The phrase actually comes from the star Sirius, which is the brightest star in the constellation Canis Major. Canis Major means big dog in Latin and was named after one of Orion's hunting dogs. The Greeks and Romans said the dog days of summer began when the star Sirius started to rise with the sun. Meantime, in other news, President Biden has been meeting with other world leaders this week in Washington, D.C. for the NATO summit. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization is marking a big milestone, its 75th anniversary. You might have heard the word NATO in the news lately, and it got us thinking, what exactly does NATO do and how did it come to be? Let's take a look.
NATO stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Headquartered in Brussels, Belgium, 32 countries are members of NATO, including the United States. But what is it?
NATO is a group of 30 countries who made a promise to each other that an attack on any one of them would be considered an attack on all of them.
How did NATO get started? Well, for the answer, we have to go back in history.
The Soviet Union, which was the country before Russia, a larger version of Russia, had designs against a lot of Europe. There were many fears that their leader, Joseph Stalin, would send what was called the Red Army, the Soviet Army, across Europe and conquer conceivably all the countries of Europe. And because they were on the European continent and the United States was not, it would not be very easy for us to resist.
So therefore, in 1949, after World War II ended, the United States, Canada, and several European countries got together and founded NATO to keep the peace. The North Atlantic Treaty was signed on April 4th, 1949 in Washington, D.C. 12 countries originally formed this alliance, meaning a formal relationship with shared interests.
And what they wanted was to create more safety. And so they thought that they could do that by promising that nobody would have to face an attack by themselves, that we would all hold hands and say, any one of us that gets attacked, we're all going to protect each other.
NATO has welcomed new members since it was founded. Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic became members of NATO after the Soviet Union collapsed. North Macedonia joined NATO in 2020, becoming its 30th member, and Finland and Sweden became members in the last year. How do you become a member? Well, first, a country must meet certain requirements and values.
A club of democracies, of countries that believe in individual rights and governments that respect their populations. And so the rationale for NATO membership over time becomes more and more about values in addition to about protection.
NATO members must agree unanimously, meaning all must be in favor before granting a new country membership, and then get their citizens to back the decision.
So it's not just a government saying, yes, this is in our interests. They have to win the political argument in their societies that we should be willing to go to war in order to protect this country.
Speaking of protection, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has prompted the United States and other allied countries to support Ukraine. But Ukraine is not a member of NATO. It is, though, what you would call a friend. It's one of the topics being discussed this week in Washington, D.C. at the NATO summit, as the organization marks the historic 75th anniversary of the alliance.
Here, these 12 leaders gather to make a sacred pledge to defend each other against aggression and to answer threats as one, to prevent future wars, to protect democracies, the single greatest, most effective defensive alliance in the history of the world.
All right, well, let's head to California now for our picture of the week. We're getting our first look at the newest additions to the San Diego Zoo, the first giant pandas to arrive in the U.S. in 21 years. Our friend Liz Kreutz has details.
They're objectively the country's cutest diplomats, and they're officially now on U.S. soil. The San Diego Zoo sharing these sneak peek images of 5-year-old Yun Xuan and 4-year-old Xing Bao, the first giant pandas to enter the United States in more than 20 years.
It's exciting, really. It's exciting, so cool.
The adorable duo's journey from China began 2 weeks ago after months of preparation. The first of even more pandas bound for the U.S., including Washington, D.C. later this year. It all marks a revival of China's panda diplomacy, which began in 1972 when a pair of pandas first arrived to the nation's capital.
I think pandemonium is going to break out right here at the zoo.
52 years later, the feeling hasn't changed.
It is so special for everybody. Our team members that now get to care for them again.
Now, it's still unknown when the pandas will be viewable to the public. They're currently in quarantine, but zoo officials say they're settling in well to their new California life.
The zoo writing the girl Xing Bao loves sunbathing and chowing down on her favorite food, bamboo, while the boy, Yun Xuan, has been spending his days climbing trees or rolling in the grass.
It's wonderful that they want to bring them back so that everybody can see the pandas.
I think this is what peace is.
The two now forever friends, helping make the strained relations between their old and new countries a little more bearable.
How fun are they to watch, right? All right, Liz, thanks very much for that. Turning now to our Inspiring Kids series. This week, one Massachusetts teen is spreading small acts of kindness from one New England town to the next. Here again is our friend Dylan Dreyer.
Connor Wright is kind at heart.
Small acts of kindness can turn into big things.
Connor should know.
These kindness kits are going to go to kids in homeless shelters.
What started out as a simple idea a few years ago has grown into something much bigger.
It was more just me and my grandmother doing 1 or 2 acts of kindness or projects a month just to help other kids in our community.
With the help of his grandmother, Connor put together COVID care packages filled with comfort items and delivered them to kids in his community of Lynnfield, Massachusetts during the pandemic.
We came up with the idea of the kindness kit. Through that, we founded Connor's Kindness Project, and that's kind of how we evolved to what we are now.
The idea took off. The nonprofit delivers kindness kits to kids who are sick and also those who are living in shelters.
It looks like this on the outside. I have it right here. And it's just a box filled with all sorts of toys. There's some educational items, fidget toys, just things like that might distract a kid in a tough or challenging situation.
With a team of volunteers, Connor's Kindness Project has delivered more than 6,000 kits across New England since they started. And guess what? Connor still finds time to personally deliver the kits himself, which he finds most rewarding.
The parents are really happy and that they bring the kids such joy. And we've gotten multiple emails and DMs from parents like, thank you so much, this helped my kids so much. And just seeing that and seeing our impact and what we're doing is what keeps us going.
And that's not all. Connor also saw an opportunity to teach other kids about the importance of giving back. Last year, he launched the Kindness Club, where he and his team traveled to elementary schools, hoping to inspire others to get involved in community service.
The kids take a pledge. We give them some examples of acts of kindness that they might do in the period of time, usually a month or so, and then they complete it.
So far, the team has visited more than 40 schools. And the teen hopes to expand Connor's Kindness Project to other parts of the country.
Our next steps are like hopefully going into New York and going down a little more and just take it one state at a time. And because we're still pretty small, even though we have a big impact, we have limits to how much we can have and how much we can deliver.
Simple acts of kindness having a big impact.
Acts of kindness can be as simple as like holding the door for people or writing letters to your teachers.
Connor, keep up the great work. Awesome. Well, there's lots of excitement building ahead of the Summer Olympic Games in Paris, just a couple weeks away now. And Team USA is getting ready, including a pair from California. And this week, some exciting news. The 2024 U.S. Olympic team roster has officially been announced. Nearly 600 athletes are on the list, a mix of new and familiar faces, including swimming stars Katie Ledecky and Caleb Dressel, and of course, gymnastics powerhouse Simone Biles. And for the fourth straight Olympics, we'll have more women than men competing, including the youngest American Olympian this time around, 16-year-old gymnast Hesley Rivera. And speaking of Team USA, say hello to this sister act, Kerry and Xu. The twins from California have been playing badminton since they were 8 years old and are heading to Paris to compete in the Olympics in the doubles competition. The sisters say their first dream was to qualify for the Olympics, and their second dream?
Next one might be like to try to promote the sport and grow the sport in the United States because it's not that well known right now.
Badminton is a racket sport played using rackets to hit a shuttlecock across a net. Did you know that badminton became an official part of the Olympic program at the 1992 Games in Barcelona, Spain? More than 170 athletes from around the world will compete in badminton in the Paris Olympics, and you can catch the Paris Summer Olympics starting July 26 on NBC and Peacock. Finally, in this week's Spotlight, our very own Laura Jarrett is sharing an important message for kids. She just released a children's book, The Color of Love. And Laura recently sat down with our nightly kids correspondent, Zoe, to talk about the book and a whole lot more. Let's check it out.
This sentence is not going to just happen overnight.
Whether she's working as a senior legal correspondent for NBC News, a co-anchor for the Weekend Today Show, or reporting for Nightly News Kids Edition, Laura Jarrett is a busy woman. But somehow she found the time to write her very own children's book called The Color of Love. She worked on the book with her friend, CNN News anchor Poppy Harlow and illustrator Alyssa Kavari. What inspired you to write this book?
I wanted to write a book that would make my two kids, James and June, proud of me. I wanted to write something that I could read with them at night. That's one of my favorite things to do, is when I can get home in time to read them stories at bedtime. And I wanted to write something that would get kids asking really hard questions. I bet you love to ask your parents hard questions. And I wanted to get kids thinking and give them something that would get them asking hard questions.
The book takes place in a classroom where a teacher asks her students to talk about what colors they think love is. And they answer everything from pink to green to silver. Was this Color of Love assignment something you did when you were a kid?
No, but we really hope that kids in schools will pick it up. And one of my favorite things about this whole thing is when teachers send me photos of doing the assignment in the classroom with their kids. So the whole book is centered around a classroom atmosphere, and part of our hope was that teachers would get something out of it and they would say, hey, this seems like a good idea. Why don't I do this with my kids in the classroom? And so now that they've been sending us photos, it's like the most heartwarming thing to see the kids actually cutting out the hearts.
What is your color of love?
I think mine would have to be brown because it makes me think about my two kids and how much I love them. And I know Poppy's is yellow, that's for sure. She loves yellow.
And while I had Laura in front of me, I couldn't help but ask her some questions about her really cool job as a senior legal correspondent. As a senior legal correspondent for NBC News, what do you cover?
I cover any big legal story, anything that gets people talking, anything where somebody has something to lose that's important to them, anytime the government is doing something that's really important and affects people's lives, or sometimes it's just something juicy. Sometimes something happened and it's just juicy and everyone wants to know what happened, and I get to do that. How cool is that? I think you should come with me one day at work. I think you might have fun at trial with me. I can see it. I think you could ask really tough questions.
What happens if the Supreme Court decides a case wrong?
This is such a good question. And that has happened. And even the Supreme Court justices would say, sometimes we get it wrong. And there's nothing they can do about it. It takes years sometimes. Remember, on the Supreme Court, that's the last court, right? That's the highest court in the whole country. And there's only 9 of them. And so every once in a while, the Supreme Court turns over, but it takes a while, right? It's for a new justice to get appointed to the Supreme Court by the president. And so it's not until sort of the makeup of the court changes sometimes, and that can take years. That could take your whole life before the makeup of the Supreme Court changes, but it's not until they decide that they want to undo what they did before that the law changes. Otherwise, that's the law forever.
If you could interview anybody in the world today, who would it be and why?
I only get one?
Yeah.
And it can't be you?
No.
And it can't be Lester Holt?
Just anyone you want.
Anyone I want, probably, I think it would probably be a justice on the U.S. Supreme Court. Ketanji Brown Jackson is the newest member of the court, and she's really interesting. And every time I go to court, Zoe, she asks really good questions. So I think that would be my all-time, must-get interview right now.
Since you know so much about the law, I have some legal questions.
Okay, hit them with me. Rapid fire.
Do you really have to wear a seatbelt in a taxi?
Yes.
Is there a law that says kids have to have a bedtime?
No.
There's an election coming up. Why can't kids vote?
Because that's about the law again, right? So the law says you have to be 18 or older to vote. Are you 18 yet?
Nope.
Okay. How soon are you going to be 18? A couple of years?
10 years.
10 years. Well, I venture to guess, based on these questions today, that you would make a really good lawmaker, the people who actually make the law. And the people who make the law say you have to be 18 or older to vote.
What is your advice to kids who want to have the same kind of job you do?
To come join me, to come see what I do. I think the best way to get a sense of whether you would like this job is to come shadow me for a day, come see what I do, and ask questions. My whole job is about asking questions and asking the right questions at the right moment. And so if that's something you like to do, you might like my job.
I learned so much from talking to Laura about her new book and her really cool job. And hopefully you did too. For Nightly News Kids Edition, I'm Zoe, reporting from New York City.
Zoe and Laura, thanks very much. Well, that's going to do it for us parents. Just a reminder, if your child has a question about any topic in the news, email a video to us at nightlynewskids@nbcuni.com, and we'll try to answer them in an upcoming episode. You can also follow us on Instagram @NightlyKids. Thanks for watching, and remember to take care of yourself and each other. So long.